It was a cold morning, too cold for a phone call like that. I was halfway through wrapping the last of the Christmas gifts. The paper I used had little gold bells on it, quiet and cheerful. My fingers were stiff, but I liked doing it myself. That's when my phone buzzed and lit up the kitchen counter. Her name blinked across the screen. I picked up thinking maybe she was calling to ask what pie I'd be bringing, or if I needed help getting from the station. But her voice was clipped, rehearsed, almost relieved. She said, "I don't think it's a good idea for you to come this year. We're doing something smaller. Just us." That was it. Not even a full minute. The call ended before I could ask anything, though I didn't have to. The message was clear. "You're not wanted here. I'm Helen Murray. I'm 71 years old," and that was the moment I knew my place had quietly vanished. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. I stood there for a long while holding a roll of tape like it meant something. The quiet in my kitchen stretched like winter wind under a door. I remember thinking how loud silence could feel, especially when it followed a voice that used to pretend it cared. The gifts were still lined up on the table. A soft cardigan for Beth, that tea sampler Sam always liked, and a wooden rattle for the baby I hadn't met yet. My hands had folded that paper with hope. I'd tied bows like I used to when Sam was little, tucking in sprigs of pine from the yard, my traditions still breathing. I thought I was part of the season. I thought they'd want me near. But I was. Told not to come, not even by my own son. He let her say it for him. I think the most painful part was that I wasn't surprised. Not really. I'd felt it for months, the slow unhooking of my place in their life. Invitations arriving later and later, texts going unanswered, stories I only heard about from neighbors or online. When I asked if I could help with the baby, Beth would smile and say, "We've got it, but thanks." When I offered to cook, she said the caterer was booked. When I said I missed them, Sam would say, "It's just been crazy lately." "Mom, nothing personal, but now." Here it was, spoken plainly. I wasn't welcome at Christmas, and once you're uninvited from Christmas, you know the truth in your bones. You're no longer family. I walked around the house for hours that day, picked up things that didn't need picking up, opened cabinets I didn't need. The weight wasn't in my chest, it was behind my ribs, slow and dull. Like something old had shifted and would never settle back right. That night, I didn't turn on the tree lights. I sat in the dark and let the quiet say what no one else would. They'd rather pretend I didn't exist than admit I mattered. There was a time when I was the center of it all. Birthdays, holidays, scraped knees, and midnight colds. I was the one who stayed up when Sam had a fever, who packed the lunches, folded the shirts inside out so the prints wouldn't fade. I worked nights at the clinic when we were behind on the mortgage, came home, boiled tea, and sat on the floor to help with spelling lists. No one ever taught me how to be a mother. I just did it the way my hands knew how, quietly, thoroughly, without asking for applause. Sam was everything to me. My only child. After his father left, or rather slowly disappeared through 100 silences, it was just the two of us. Us, me, and this little boy with wide eyes and a laugh like wind chimes. I remember how tightly he used to hold my hand crossing the street. How he'd say things like, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll buy you a big house one day, with a swing, just." For you, I didn't need a swing. I needed him to remember. For years, we were close. Not always easy, no mother and son are, but close in the way people are when they've been through fire together. I was there for every spelling bee, every broken bone, every heartbreak. I helped him move into his college dorm, left a note in his sock drawer that said, "Proud of you always. Call me if you need anything." He did. First Dot, then came Beth. She was polished, a good speaker. Kind, at least in the beginning. She knew how to make people feel welcomed without actually letting them in. I tried with her, I really did. Brought her flowers the first time she came for dinner. Complimented her cooking, even when she served undercooked lamb on Easter. Bit my tongue when she rearranged my kitchen while I was in the bathroom. She'd smile and call me Mom, but never asked me much. When Sam looked at her, something in him softened and pulled away from me. I thought, that's what love does. It reshapes the center. I accepted it, but slowly the phone calls thinned. Invitations came late, or with the kind of tone that said, we're only inviting you because it would be rude not to. I'd bring pies to their house, and Beth would say, oh, we already have dessert, but thank you. I'd offer to babysit when they were expecting, and she said, we've hired someone just in case. I nodded and smiled, even when it stung. Then came the baby, a boy, my grandson. And I wasn't there for the birth. They told me after. Sent a photo. No middle name, even though Sam had once said he'd use my father's. I didn't say anything. I just saved the photo and whispered his name to the empty living room. People say you shouldn't expect anything from your children, that you raise them so they can leave. I don't believe that. Love, when it's real, doesn't need repayment, but it shouldn't require disappearance either. I wasn't asking for anything. I just wanted to be remembered, to be part of the story. But Beth wrote me out slowly, page by page, and Sam letter. I tried harder than I should have. Bought gifts I couldn't afford. Drove 3 hours just to drop off soup when Beth had the flu. Once I sat in their driveway for 10 minutes before I realized no one was going to come out and say hello. They had forgotten I was stopping by. Or maybe they hadn't. I'll never know. One day I brought over a box of books from Sam's childhood. Picture books, bedtime favorites. Beth took them at the door and said, we're doing a minimalist thing with the nursery, but thank you. She closed the door softly. I stood there for a moment and then drove home with my window cracked open to breathe. I wish I could say there was one big moment that ended things, but there wasn't. Just a slow erosion, a hollowing. I went from mother to guest to ghost. And when the Christmas call came, it wasn't a surprise. It was just the final period on a sentence I hadn't wanted to read. I spent that evening walking through my house, noticing how little of me existed in their world now. No framed photos at their place, no calls to check in. Not even a happy Thanksgiving this year. The silence had grown thick, and I had let it. I had fed it with every too polite smile, every carefully wrapped gift, every second chance I gave them in my heart. But mothers are not made of endless forgiveness. We may be quiet, but we are not hollow. That night, I took the wrapped presents and placed them in the hallway. Sat down and opened my notebook, the one I kept tucked in the drawer beneath the phone. I started writing down everything. Dates, names, decisions, a map of how I got here. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, just to remember that I was real, that I gave everything, and that I would give no more. The invitation to the babies first. Birthday never came. I found out through a neighbor. She was scrolling on her phone, showing me pictures of her grandkids, when she paused and said, oh, look, your little one had his party last weekend. I blinked, pretending I already knew. Pretending the air hadn't just left the room. I went home and opened the app I rarely touched. There they were. Balloons. A little cake shaped like a train. Sam crouched beside his son, helping him blow out the single candle. Beth, in a soft pink dress, holding the boy in her arms like he was a medal. The caption said, grateful for our tribe. I wasn't in a single frame. Not even a mention in the thank yous below. Not even a tag. I sat with that for a long time. That quiet kind of pain that makes you feel childish because you want to say something, but you know it won't change a thing. You'll only look bitter, or worse, desperate. That night I read back the text Beth sent about Christmas. I don't think it's a good idea for you to come this year. We're doing something smaller. Just us. Just us. That was the phrase that stayed with me. Not we're busy. Not next time. Not we're traveling. Just us. I realized she had drawn a circle and made sure I stood outside of it. What surprised me more than the exclusion was the calm in me. It was like my heart finally understood the math. It was done trying to make sense of fractions that never added up. All the little ways they had trimmed me out of their lives, it wasn't random. Design. I didn't cry that night. I just opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the papers I had kept over the years. Deeds, wills, medical forms. A copy of the house title, the one with my name on it, still mine, even after Sam had helped me update some utilities to his name a while back. I remembered the day he asked if he could streamline things, said it would be easier in case of emergencies. I said yes. I always said yes to him, but not everything had changed hands. I had kept certain things untouched. Maybe because something in me never fully trusted what I wasn't allowed to see. There was one paper in particular that chilled me when I read it again. A document from a notary I didn't remember meeting. My name was on it, but not my handwriting. It was supposed to be an authorization form allowing Sam to manage certain banking tasks on my behalf. I looked closer. The signature was close, but it wasn't mine. And the date. It was a Tuesday. I had been at the hospital that day, volunteering in the long-term wing. Kept a little logbook of my hours. The timing didn't match. That's when the ache shifted. Okay? Turned. Not sharp, not loud, just different. A deeper kind of knowing. The kind that doesn't argue or second guess. The kind that stands still and sees it. It was never just about being forgotten. It was about being moved. Piece by piece. I closed the folder, set it on the kitchen table, and made myself tea. Not to calm down, just to stay warm while the cold of understanding settled in. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes with paperwork. It's with birthday photos you never received. With your own name misspelled on a form you never signed. It comes with silence that someone else decided for you. I remembered something Beth had said. Maybe a year ago, during a Sunday lunch. We were talking about old family traditions, and I'd mentioned how I wanted to pass the house to Sam one day to keep the memory of his childhood alive. She smiled and said, "That's sweet, but we're thinking about something more modern, maybe a tear-down and rebuild." This place has good land value. It stung then, but now I saw it for what it was. A plan. The kind that doesn't need confrontation. To be real, just paperwork, just distance, just enough time for you to stop noticing the erasure. But I noticed. Too late to stop it all, maybe, but not too late to choose what comes next. I put the folder away that night, but I didn't sleep. I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the things I had handed over. Not money, not property, myself, my energy, my loyalty, my silence. That was the last thing they'd get from me. I may not be strong in the ways people post about I don't run marathons or shout my story on the internet, but I remember everything. I write things down. I keep copies, and I still had the original deed, still had the keys, still had my name, and no matter how many signatures they forged or calls they didn't return, they couldn't take that without me noticing again. The next morning, I packed. A bag not with clothes, with proof. I used to think leaving was something loud. A suitcase slammed shut. A final argument. A door that never swung open again. But when I started packing, it wasn't loud at all. It was quiet. Like setting down a heavy object you didn't realize you'd been carrying. The bag was small. I folded the papers into a document pouch and placed it gently on top. No clothes, not yet. Just the truth, typed, signed, dated. I took the key from the ceramic dish by the door and ran my fingers along its edges. Same house key I'd had for 26 years. The grooves had worn soft from use, but it still opened everything. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one left to tell. I stopped texting Sam weeks ago. He didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't mention it. Beth certainly didn't. She was busy posting curated glimpses of their life, all white decor and matchy outfits, their son's face blurred for privacy. But not privacy from me. I'd given up asking to be included. Now I was giving up pretending to belong. I made a list that week. Not a to-do list, not resolutions, just truths. I wrote them out one by one in neat, careful script. I am not a burden. I'm not confused. I saw what they did. I still have choices. Then I turned the page and wrote a name I hadn't thought of. In a while. Lydia was a friend from back when I still worked the early shift at the clinic. She was tough and funny, the kind of woman who didn't need anyone's approval to breathe. She used to say things like, if they don't want you at their table, build your own damn table. I always laughed, thinking I wasn't that kind of strong, but I called her that evening, turned her voice came through with warmth, surprised but solid. I asked if she still had that spare room in her garden flat. She did. I asked if I could come for a few days, maybe longer. She said, of course, what's mine is yours. No questions. That's how you know who your people are. I didn't rush. I moved through the house like it was a museum of a life I no longer lived. I looked at everything, the frames, the books, the marks on the wall where Sam's height was measured in pen. I didn't cry, not even when I paused by the old photo of us at the beach, his hair sun-bleached, his arms around my neck like I was the only safe place in the world. I wasn't. Sentimental. I was saying goodbye not to the house, to the version of me who waited for a call that would never come. I left a note on the table, not a dramatic one. It's just a line or two written on the back of a recipe card. Gone for now. Taking care of myself. Don't try to reach me. I need space you never gave. I packed a few clothes, my medications, and the velvet pouch that held my grandmother's ring. I hadn't worn it in years. But something in me needed to remember I came from women who knew how to survive. When I locked the door behind me, I didn't look back. I drove to Lydia's place with the windows down, even though the air was cold. The wind made my eyes water, and I let it. It was easier than crying. Her house was small and warm. She had tea ready, and a plate of ginger biscuits. We sat on the couch and said very little. Sometimes healing begins with someone simply making space for your silence. That night in her spare room, I slept deeper than I had in months. No dreams, no spirals. Just rest. The next morning, I took a walk around her block. The sun was out and the cold wasn't bitter anymore. It felt like something clean. I stopped in front of a little local office with a sign that said Braden Realty. It had a bell on the door. I didn't go in, not yet. But I stood there for a while, just breathing, watching the people inside move around like they were part of something I hadn't believed in for a while. Possibility when I got back. I took out the folder and spread the papers on the bed. I looked at everything, what I owned, what had my name on it, what didn't. I highlighted things, drew arrows, made notes. I wasn't angry. I was prepared. There's a power in documentation that no apology can undo. That evening, I called a lawyer. Not one of the ones Sam had recommended years ago. No. This one was referred by Lydia's niece. A woman with a sharp mind and a kind voice. She didn't talk down to me. She asked questions like she expected I already knew the answers. And I did. By the end of the call, we had a plan. Not for revenge. Not to punish. Just to reclaim. I wasn't going back. I was going forward. Even if they never saw me again. Especially if they never saw me again. That night, I placed the gifts in a box. All of them still wrapped, untouched. I didn't remove the tags. Just sealed the box with brown tape and wrote one word, cross the top : return . I made the call the next morning. Braden Realty. I asked to speak with an agent about listing a home, gave them the address. The woman on the line asked if I was the homeowner. Yes, I said. My name is on the deed. There was a pause, and then she said, of course, let's schedule a walkthrough. I chose Thursday at 10 a.m. I didn't mention that it was the same day Sam usually dropped by to collect his mail. He still had some things registered there. It didn't matter now. I had the keys. I still had everything they thought I'd quietly hand over. I returned to the house early that morning. The air was sharp, but the sky was clear. I let myself in through the back door, the same one I used to open when Sam would come running in from school, dropping his backpack and asking, what's for dinner, Mama? I didn't stay long, just enough to walk through once more, slow and sure, noting what needed touch-ups, what the agent might ask me to move or clean. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't sad. I was composed, like someone finishing a final chapter, not tearing pages out. The real estate agent arrived right on time. Her name was Miriam, early 40s, bright scarf, clipboard in hand. She smiled wide and professional, not knowing this wasn't just a house, it was my whole former life held between walls. We toured the rooms. She complimented the light, the floors, the quiet charm of the space. I listened, nodded, answered questions like it was just business. Because it was now. She asked if I'd lived here long. 20-6 years. I said, raised a son here. He's grown now. That's wonderful, she said. I didn't tell her the rest. I didn't say he hadn't stepped foot inside in months. Not since Beth started scheduling visits, like I was a burden. I didn't say how many Christmases had gone by with me sitting at this same table alone. Pretending turkey for one was enough. She didn't need to know. We sat at the kitchen counter. I signed the first documents with a pen I'd used to. Signed birthday cards, bills, recipes. It felt like taking my name back one stroke at a time. Once the papers were scanned and filed, I asked her one final thing. Could we leave the for sale sign off until Friday? Just for a day. Of course, she said. Whatever you need. And then she was gone. I stayed behind and boxed up a few things. Some photos, my grandmother's china, a few books I couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else could stay. I had already let it go, piece by piece. The wrapped Christmas gifts were still stacked in the hall closet. I pulled them out, brushed off the ribbon, and placed them gently in a reusable shopping bag. They felt heavier than before, not because of what was inside, but because of what they used to mean. Hope, inclusion, effort. Now they were just packages, wrapped for people who'd asked me not to show up. I drove back to Lydia's place in silence. Didn't turn on the radio. The bag of gifts sat on the passenger seat, upright like a quiet passenger. I passed by the realty office again and saw Miriam through the glass. She didn't see me, but I waved anyway. Once, that night, I wrote a letter. Not addressed to Sam, not to Beth, to myself. A letter I wished someone had written me long ago. You don't need to wait for love that comes on someone else's terms. You are allowed to leave without permission. You don't have to prove your worth by staying where you are not seen. It is not petty to protect your heart. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not invisible. I folded the letter and placed it inside the gift bag. Nestled between the cardigan and the wooden rattle, the next morning I woke early, showered, got dressed in my cleanest coat. Then I drove back to the house one final time. No hesitation, no nostalgia. Just a clean breath of cold morning air. The front lawn was still dewy. I walked up, set the gift bag right beneath the edge of the wooden sign where the realtor would place her board later that afternoon. And then I tied the ribbon to the signpost myself. No tag. No explanation, just a quiet offering left behind. Not for them. Really? For me, I stepped back, looked at the house, and saw not a home anymore, but a structure, a transaction, a shell I no longer lived in, and I didn't cry. I turned, walked to my car, and drove away. That was the morning I left the gifts with the realtor's sign, and no one even noticed until days later. The for sale sign went up on a Tuesday. Lydia was the one who noticed first. She texted me a photo while I was folding laundry. It's up, hun. Looks clean. No one's touched the gift bag. I stared at the picture for a long time. My old house, the white wood siding catching morning light. The realtor's sign staked firm in the front lawn like a final word. And there, at the base, the blue gift bag still standing, untouched. Waiting by Wednesday afternoon, the calls began. The first was from Sam. I didn't answer. Then a second one. Voicemail. Mom. Hey, I just saw the sign outside. Don't. Understand? Can you call me back, please? I didn't. He messaged an hour later. Just one line. Why didn't you tell me? I read it 3 times and still didn't respond. What would I even say? 'Cause when I tried to talk, you were always too busy. Because you let her speak for both of you. Because you made silence your answer too. Many times they don't ask why someone leaves unless they think you never could. By Thursday, Beth had reached out. A long text. No greeting, no warmth. We're confused and upset. We could have discussed this. There are other ways to handle things than blindsiding your own family. I stared at the word family. That's what they always pull out, and control slips through their hands. The word family, as if that's enough to erase everything they didn't do, didn't say. Didn't care to fix. I didn't reply to her either. I let the silence speak the way they had for years. On Friday, I received a message from a mutual acquaintance. A woman from the neighborhood committee who still believed in polite concern. Just a heads up. Sam and Beth are telling people you're confused, maybe overwhelmed. They said they're trying to stop the sale but don't want to upset you. That was when I felt it, not sadness, not anger. A kind of clarity that settled in my chest like warm stone. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about losing the Kerrs. They were worried about losing the house, not losing what they thought they already owned. They'd never asked if I was lonely, but now they were calling daily to ask if I was certain. Yes, I was certain when I signed. I was certain when I packed. I was certain when I drove away without slamming the door. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was about boundaries finally being drawn in permanent. Inc.Beth emailed next. Formal this time, we'd appreciate the opportunity to discuss a possible pause in the sale. For the baby's sake. The baby whose birthday I'd never been invited to. The baby I'd never held. Now. Suddenly, I was important enough to consult, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, but as an obstacle. I didn't answer that email either. They sent a letter to the Realty office, Miriam told me gently, with a sigh. They're asking if the listing can be delayed. Said they weren't informed and it's all a misunderstanding. I asked her, are they on the deed? She smiled. No, only you. Then let the sign stay. Later that evening, Sam left a voicemail. His voice was softer this time, slower. Almost like the boy I remembered. I know you're angry. I know we've been distant. Maybe we didn't make space the way we should have. But can we talk, please? Let's talk. There was a long pause. Then he added, I miss you, Mom. And I believed him. But missing someone is not the same as valuing them. Sometimes people miss the warmth of you, and they no longer have access to it. That doesn't mean they deserve to come back in. I sat with that. Message for a while, played it once, deleted it. No part of me wanted revenge. I wasn't trying to punish anyone, but I had grown tired of being the only one bending, the only one showing up. The only one wrapping gifts that sat unopened in closets I wasn't invited to enter. I didn't want apologies wrapped in panic. I wanted peace. And peace doesn't come from someone else fixing things. It comes from deciding you're done waiting. They stopped calling by. Sunday, maybe they realized I wasn't bluffing. Maybe they moved on to damage control. But I didn't care. The noise had passed and what came after was stillness. Not emptiness, not regret, just space. I went for a walk that evening, down to the little park near Lydia's place. I sat on a bench and watched 2 children racing their scooters up and down the path. Their mother trailed behind, calling out gentle warnings. Slow down. Watch the curb. Come back here, please. I smiled. Not because I missed it, but because I remembered how fully I had loved, how deeply I had mothered. No one could rewrite that. And no one could take it from me now. I started drinking my coffee outside again at Lydia's place. The backyard isn't big, just a square of grass, 2 iron chairs, and a bird feeder that leans slightly to the right. But it's quiet. I sit out there in the mornings, wrap myself in a shawl, and let the light come slowly. There's no rush anymore. No calendar appointments circled in red. No holiday invitations to anxiously wait for. It's just breath, steam rising from the cup, and the sound of sparrows nudging each other at the feeder. It surprised me how quickly stillness becomes a habit once you stop chasing noise. Lydia never asked questions I didn't want to answer. She knew better than to push. We had been young women once, sitting on plastic break room chairs, trading stories about bills and bad bosses and what to cook when payday was still 2 days away. Time had weathered us both, but some bonds don't. Lucine with age. They grow quieter, stronger. She said you can stay as long as you like. I told her I'd start looking for something small. Just a one-bedroom near the market or the library. Nothing fancy, just mine. She nodded. A home you're wanted in. And I smiled, 'cause I didn't even realize how much I'd needed to hear those words. A week after the listing went up, I received a letter, not from Sam, from Beth. Typed, 4 paragraphs, polite, tense. She apologized for any miscommunication and said she hoped I was well. She mentioned the baby, how he'd started walking, how it would be nice if I could see him sometime. She included a picture, glossy staged, her holding the boy against a backdrop of fall leaves. No mention of the house, no mention of Christmas. I turned the photo over blank. I didn't cry. I just placed it in a drawer with the others. Not out of anger, but because I didn't want to throw away something that still held a trace of Sam, a trace of who we used to be. But I didn't write back. I didn't need to. There's something about losing what you never really had. It stops hurting once you name it. That Christmas, Lydia and I cooked dinner together. Roasted vegetables, a chicken with too much rosemary, and a pie that crumbled at the edges but still tasted like memory. We poured wine and watched an old holiday film where everyone wore wool coats and said things they meant. It was quiet, warm. She asked if I missed them. I said I miss who they used to be. Or maybe who I used to think they were. She didn't press. Later that week, I found a notice taped to the Realtor's sign back at the house. Someone had drawn a heart in red ink and written, "Good luck, Miss Helen. We'll miss your pies." No name, just that. I stood there on the sidewalk and let the wind lift the corners of the paper. Someone remembered, even if it wasn't family. I smiled all the way back to the car. After the sale went through, I gave Lydia a small envelope. Inside was a check enough to cover what I owed and a little more. She protested. Said she didn't do this for money? I know, I said. But this is me standing on my own 2 feet again. She held the check, then pulled me into a hug that smelled like cinnamon and eucalyptus oil. You always were stronger than you let on. A month later, I moved into my new place. Small, yes, but filled with light. 1 bedroom, a modest kitchen, and a little sunroom that I filled with books and herbs and a chair I found at a second-hand store. I strung fairy lights across the window, not because anyone would see them, but because I liked how they looked against the dusk. I planted basil on the windowsill. I kept fresh bread in the kitchen. I played old records in the evening, letting the voice of long-gone singers fill the rooms like company. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. A woman named Joanne, late 50s, a retired school teacher with a soft voice and a laugh that creaked. She brought banana bread wrapped in foil and said she'd seen me moving in. We talked on the porch for nearly an hour. She didn't ask about my past. She just told me about her cat and the time her roof caved in during a rainstorm. I laughed, for the first time in a long while. It wasn't tight in my throat, she said. We have a book club. You should come. Maybe I will, I said. And I meant it. Not because I wanted to belong, but because I was starting to believe I could. There's something sacred about building a life where nothing is expected of you but your own peace. No performance. No proving, just presence. I still think of Sam sometimes. Of course I do. I wonder if he ever looks at the corner of the living room where we hung stockings each year. If he remembers the sound of wrapping paper on Christmas Eve, The way I used to tuck handwritten notes into his gifts. Maybe he forgets. Maybe Beth hides those memories on purpose. Maybe he keeps them somewhere private, afraid to admit they still mean something. But I don't wait for the phone to ring. Not anymore. I lit a candle the night I unpacked the last box, sat in the sunroom, wrapped in a shawl, and whispered to the walls, "This is home now. Not because of who visits, but because I chose it. Because here, I am not an afterthought. I am not an obligation. I am simply me." The letter arrived in spring, not a card, not a typed apology, a real letter. Handwritten, the ink pressed into the paper like someone had taken their time. I recognized the writing right away. It was shakier than I remembered, but still his Sam Doddett came in a plain envelope. No return address, no stickers or frills. Just my name in his old, slightly slanted print, the same way he used to label his school notebooks. I didn't open it right away. Kay let it sit on the counter beside my teacup, next to a magazine I hadn't read and a recipe for lentil soup I wasn't planning to make. I went about my day, watered the plants, wrote a grocery list, folded a few towels, but it sat there, quiet and heavy. That evening, when the light had softened through the windows and the house had grown still, I opened it. "Dear Mom, I don't really know where to begin. I guess I should have called. But I didn't know if you'd answer. I've thought about what happened, what I let happen every day since you left. Since I saw that sign outside the house, since the gifts were left sitting there, I don't know how to explain what I did, except to say that I thought we had more time. I thought you'd always be there. I didn't realize how much I had let Beth decide who belonged and who didn't. I don't blame her. I blame myself. You gave me everything. I know that. I remember the peanut butter sandwiches, the late night drives. It's the way you held me when I was too proud to ask for comfort. I didn't mean to erase you. I was just ... trying to keep peace in my own house. But it shouldn't have come at the cost of yours. I'm sorry for Christmas, for the birthday, for letting your kindness become a thing we used without thanks. You deserved better. I miss you, and if you're willing to talk, just talk. I'd like to see you. Love, Sami." Read it twice. Folded it back neatly and placed it in the drawer beside the photo Beth had sent months before. Then I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the night outside my window. My heart didn't break. It settled. I had spent so many years hoping for a sentence like that, an admission, a reaching back. And now that it was here, I didn't feel what I thought I would. No surge of longing, no tears. It's just the calm ache of understanding that came too late to change anything. Still, I wrote back, not to reopen the door, but to offer closure that didn't require my return. "Dear Sam, thank you for your letter. I believe you mean every word. And I believe you are sorry, but something inside me has changed, quietly, over many seasons. I have found a kind of peace that does not depend on being included. I raised you with my whole heart. And I don't regret that. But I can't keep standing on a doorstep that never opens. You chose silence for a long time, and I lived in it. Now I've chosen space. And I intend to keep it. You don't need to carry guilt, just awareness. Treat the people in your life with the care you forgot to give me. That's all I ask. I love you, but I've stopped waiting for you to remember how to love me back." Mom, I mailed it the next day. No ceremony, no expectation. Just a clean white envelope sent to the only address I had memorized even now. A week later, I received a text. It was short, "I understand. Sorry again. I'll always be here if you change your mind." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about setting them free from the version of you that needed their apology. Sometimes it's about giving yourself the last word quietly, without bitterness. That Sunday, Joanne stopped by with a bundle of spring flowers, said she saw them on sale and thought of me. We had tea on the porch. Talked about tomatoes and overripe mangoes and the way birds start building nests when no one's looking. When she left, sat for a while, watching the light fall across the railing. I wasn't lonely, not anymore. And that was the real apology I'd been waiting for. Not his, mine, to myself. The realtor texted last week. The house finally sold. She said the new owners are a young couple, no children yet, but full of plans. They loved the kitchen. Said it felt like somewhere memories could begin. I didn't ask the price. I didn't need to know what it was worth in numbers. I knew what it cost in heart. And I had already paid. It didn't feel like a loss, or like something being returned to the earth. A home that had held my joy, my grief, my silence. And finally, my decision. I walked past it one last time a few days before closing, not to stand in the yard just to pass by. From across the street, it looked exactly the same. Blue shutters, cracks in the walkway, that same hydrangea bush still hanging on stubbornly despite the season. The gift bag was long gone, of course. But in my mind, it's still there. That small, quiet rebellion, wrapped with ribbon, tied not with anger, but with truth. I didn't stay long. I walked a little further to the park, sat on a bench, and let the breeze speak its own language. I thought of all the times I waited for someone to call, to invite me, to say the words I thought would make me feel real again. And now, sitting in the soft hush of a day with no expectations, I realized I no longer needed any of it. Not the apology, not the explanation, not even the closure, because I had already closed the door myself, gently. My new home, there's a small drawer in the side table where I keep certain things. My grandmother's ring, the letter from Sam, a seashell I found on a walk with Lydia, smooth and cracked, but still whole, and a piece of ribbon, just the end of it, torn slightly. From that last gift bag I left behind, I keep it not as a symbol of pain, but of release. The day I tied that ribbon to the realtor's sign, I untied myself from everything that refused to hold me kindly. I still get texts now and then. A photo here, a forwarded joke there, nothing consistent. Nothing intimate. But I don't chase it anymore. I read them. Sometimes I smile. Sometimes I delete them before the ache can arrive. I've learned to let people be who they are even, when who they are no longer has room for you. That isn't bitterness. That's clarity. I've begun planting again. Nothing fancy. Just herbs in small clay pots on the windowsill. Basil, mint, rosemary. They grow toward the light. Quietly, asking for nothing more than water and patience. Some mornings, I whisper to them, grow only where you are safe. It's something I'm learning. To say to myself, last week, the book club met in my sunroom. For women, always stories that don't fit in polite conversation. Widows, mothers of estranged sons. Women who once made casseroles for families who now keep their distance. We talked about the novel for a while, then we didn't. We talked about other things we don't say out loud unless someone leaves room for them. At the end, Joanne hugged me tight and said, I'm so glad you moved here. And I meant it when I said, so am I. THEY never taught us how to start over in our 70s. No one prepared us for the strange, quiet grief of being erased without drama. No slammed doors, just fewer calls, shorter visits. A seat that slowly disappears from the table. But I've learned this. Starting over isn't about building something new and shiny. It's about finding something soft enough to hold your own name again and hearing it in your own voice. When I walk through my little home now, I touch everything with new hands. The kettle, the coat hook, the edge of the curtain. I hemmed myself. Each item says, this is mine. Not because I paid for it, because I chose it, because I stayed, because I left when staying meant losing myself. I am no longer waiting at the edges of someone else's story. I'm in the center of my own. There is no big dramatic ending to tell. No surprise phone call. No tearful reunion. Just a quiet life unfolding room by room. And peace, finally. That doesn't ask to be earned. Only honored. This morning I made tea and sat on the porch with the shell in my hand, ran my thumb across the rough edge where it cracked. Even broken things can feel smooth. Given time, I looked at the sky and whispered, "This time I decide who gets to call me anything else." The end.